Oh, hello everyone again. That uh, you have heard to the four speakers who have presented well, and now it's my chance as the chair of this session to give a summary of the presentation and then maybe make a very brief remark, comment on them. I am Masudul Choudhury. I am a retired professor in economics in Cape Breton University, Sydney, Nova Scotia, in Canada. But I continue on teaching um, of my record as a full-time professor with the Trishakti University Department of Economics in the postgraduate program of Islamic Economics and Finance, where I am the international chair as well as one of the founders of that institution, a very active institution globally, carrying on that mission of educational uh, dis- uh, uh, programs of teaching and research at the postgraduate, at the PhD level. Now, I'm going to combine Mr. Rodney Shakespeare's and Dr. Talib Warsi's paper together, as there is a commonality between the two papers that they have presented separately. Now, Shakespeare, Mr. Rodney Shakespeare is just trying to delve into uh, uh, a very new field that requires a good deal of attention. And though, of course, that this field, this kind of questioning of economic science has been in the record for quite some time, but nonetheless, in terms of finding out or discovering, searching and discovering a unique theory that will give a new paradigm, or which should be based on a new paradigm, and therefore present its details on the basis of that paradigm. As such a kind of investigation is not to be found in the economic literature by and large. Now, Mr. Rodney Shakespeare goes on, firstly, to compare the emergence of a new paradigm with that which is existing today, and what is the nature of the difference of the partition between these two approaches, a new paradigm and something that is existing, that is a normal science. And he says that essentially this is a tussle, is a kind of a wrestle that is going on between the center and the periphery of thinking, of thoughtful investigation. Now, in the center are people of the normal science who have innovated, of course, and still not being able to reach and design, give a structure, a shape and form, and claim a new paradigm at the edges. So there remains this kind of um, uh, a continuing argumentation between the center and the periphery, despite nonetheless to say that there are many, those who belong to the center uh, of thinking in the old normal way of thinking, who have gone and argued against their prevalent ways of the centric thinking, and have gone and floated the idea of and the need for a new paradigm to come and reshape the scientific thinking. That so the center has drifted in some ways to the periphery, and he has given a lot of examples in the history of the emergence of science to establish his claim. Now, within that, he has said that there, in the field of economics, there is a new and budding. What he called is something beyond. It's a Thomist idea which goes beyond simply talking about a new paradigm. It's really in the field of the structure of scientific revolution, and this is to give an argumentation, a what we call an epistemological meaning to the new budding area of uh, of, of, of economics, and this is the area where he says, well, the whole big question is interest. Is interest, that the financial interest that we have, strewn over all the pages of economics, and has been a lot of ink spelt in this in the treatment of interest in economic stabilization, economic growth, and efficiency. Are these really, is interest rate really a required parameter to give that kind a argumentative power to prevalent economic field? And he said that this is not necessary, because interest is generated, it is created by the central bank and supplied to the economy at no cost. And therefore, such a interest, such a element, such a resource, and a flow that comes out of the central bank with no cost in it, really in the social sense should not carry any cost, and that cost being the cost of capital. And that cost of capital is the rate of interest that Mr. Shakespeare is trying to point out. And hence, it is not a required thing. It can be supplanted. That is, he is arguing that it can be replaced by yet another kind of a relationship between money and the real economy. And it is that kind of a relationship that, when exercised, when put into the books and activities, and the thoughtful activities of the central bank and the government together, to put that into action, to replace the role of interest as a cost of capital by the role of the yield that is generated between the quantity of money circulating in the economy and the real economy itself, that this interest rate itself can be supplanted by something which is productive and which carries with it a social efficiency with it. And this is an argument that has been presented by Mr. Rodney Shakespeare. And Dr. Talib joins in to show that really very many great mega projects would have really saved a whole lot of capital by really removing its interest bearing foundation. There's reliance on interest and putting it into this order of the relationship between money and the real economy. And that saving itself would have become a social capital to fund very many important and ethical projects in a more humanely way. The paper following by Dr. Abdul Qadir Qasim is along the same lines, but he points out that there is still a gap existing. There is an existing gap in formulating what truly would be the nature of the new paradigm. And this is a question that he places before not only the presently existing field of economics, which is devoid of any ethical moorings in it. It cannot really. There is um, no way. So there's no methodology or a method that it can be really invoked to put ethics as a kind of a functioning element in economic thinking and economic actions and the policies and the recommendation, the activities that thereby follow. he he puts that in the framework as a question to the existing uh, economic field, but also at the same time he's throwing that question as a challenge to the Muslim, to the Islamic economies. That is to say, those who over a certain period of time now, right, as I can count, is around 80 years, have been cultivating this field of economics called Islamic economics, and more recently it has also branched out into Islamic finance. Okay. And he says that, well, this is because both the Occidental world and the Islamic, the Muslim world, that is those who are trying to pursue this field of Islamic, develop it, search it, and develop it, they have by and large forgotten the ontological and epistemological, the entire facade of how a thoughtful idea can be raised on the basis of a certain thing that can be original in focus and content. Okay, and he places two very important uh, figures to show this contrast, and it shows the center of the prevalent world is this, that is really taken in the form of physicalism, okay, materiality. And it is this physicalism that becomes the ontological theory of the being of the universe, of what is the universe about, what is the market about, what is the price of value, and all of these things are things that as they occur. Okay. So essentially, the question of how they occur on the basis of a more fundamental fact is something that is not very much investigative. Okay. Uh, is a thing that if you want to really bring about a new paradigm, then really you have to do some kind of soul searching to step back and find out the origin of thoughtful ideas that really will give new, meaningful, purposeful shape and form to the elements that we talk about in the economic field in terms of price, output, money, as spending. But as it exists to at the present time, because the physicalism occupies the central field, the whole very very many very fundamental idea, with most required idea of human betterment, that human well-being, that is of ethics. It itself is not an explicative. Okay, it has not been explained, or where it has been explained in economics, when it comes and enters the economic field, then it comes from an external premise, that is an exogenous premise. And it therefore becomes a kind of if you want to say that, well, who are the ones that who will take up this charge of economic, of ethical activity? And the thing is not that that ethical activity really doesn't have anything to do with the human preferences. Human preferences are ontologically governed as they are governed. Okay? Whereas the ethical intervention that is made to make ethics give ethics and inroads into economics is done by the government, and therefore it is a separate exogenous and autonomously a separate field that really are an institution that really enters into the marketplace, into economic functioning. And that is the core of the argument that Dr. Abdul Qadir Qasim Mohammadi is presenting. And according to that, of course, then comes about the mechanism, the kinds of models and methods and methodologies that surround this physicalist approach of understanding of the universe. And it reminds me of the alternative, that if one were to really talk about a new paradigm in accessing the economic field, and that fundamental new paradigm would be to replace the physicalist centrist view, and then in doing so to show how ethics becomes not an exogenous but an endogenous, consciously governed factor within all the economic parameters and the variables and the models. Okay, this is therefore a kind of a consciously driven, okay, economic system that needs to be dynamically cultivated. And that's where the speaker goes and talks about Islamic economics was the center of the whole argumentation. It is, that is to say, that if you have the rise of a new paradigm, then you have to go for search and discovery into that kind of recess, into the recesses of thinking. And that recess of thinking is not devoid of reality. And that which Abdul Qasim Mahmoudi is trying to place is the monotheism. That is the monotheistic view of the universe. And that monotheistic view of the universe is not something that is a static divine law which has nothing to rule and play in the human system, but rather becomes primarily a most fundamental, most active and dynamic um, functioning force in all of the things that that humans concern themselves with. And this is, and that itself, once you place that kind of centric idea of the monotheistic idea with that kind of a light in it of dynamics, then of course the methods, the methodology, the assumptions, the axiom, all of those things start to vary fundamentally and most distinctly from the way we have perceived them, we have used them, and you have taught them and researched upon in the physicalist view of of economics without ethics. And ethics becomes a part and parcel of the second way of putting it into the entire economic system, where the Western world has, or the Occidental world has slipped away, is not to be able to, because of its own methodological failing. And that is where the ontological differences arise, is the methodological failing into to perceive that how ethics and morality can be really introduced into scientific thinking as a result of its beginning, this initiation at the point of what we see there as a physicalist ontology, a physicalist existentialist way of understanding the universe, without really understanding how ethics and morality, as very fundamental, most important issues of human existence, can be really introduced and studied. This is the question that has been raised by Abdul Qadir Qasim Mahmoudi, and it pervades, as his arguments go, it pervades the whole of all of the sciences, in between what it is and what it can be. If we were to take the second departing point of view, that departing point of view is the point of the new paradigm, and that new paradigm is based on monotheism. And that is a challenge that he has placed between Muslim scholars who are pursuing their efforts in this field of discovering the field of Islamic economics and finance presently, and that is to give that orientation, that how truly ethics can become an endogenous functioning and very dynamic factor within the parameters of economics, and therefore prices and output and all the different areas of money and spending and the real economy, all of those things have to be fired by an endogenous activity of ethics in it. And that ethics therefore becomes a part and parcel of the human consciousness, as well as what Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist in the University of New York, had written and that is that human machines, that machines made and given to the world of scientific ability, that those machines, the world themselves, can be made to be conscious, and therefore conscious is a very wide, pervasive phenomenon that is to be reckoned with. The fourth paper by Dr. Ari is a very important paper in this age where we find before us a burst a kind of a burst of legions of technological diversity coming about. And not to speak of not only the gadgets in machine form, in practical physical form, those which are artifacts of our lives, but also in the way we think, and we put that thinking that we embrace. How do we put it in the construction of the machines, in the construction of the artifacts uh, that we embrace later on? And therefore, according to her, that the coming of the new age, the age of technological burst that we are facing today, has the capability, the ability to really study the God, man, and universe interrelationship. And this God, man, and God, man, and universal relationship is essentially a great topic. It's a great topic for investigation in the area of human consciousness transmitting itself as endogenous force into the whole length and breadth of the artifactual world in which we experience and we live, and we act, and we keep on going. So therefore, our existentialist world, the experiential world itself, is therefore not devoid of this very important factor of consciousness. And this consciousness, according to Ari, is given, is possible. It's enabled by understanding the human, by understanding the scientific way of interrelating God, man, and the universe. And according to her, therefore, the present day coming up, like for instance, the fourth industrial revolution, should really engage itself, return its direction, its focus in this very important area, to enable technology to carry that message of universality. So these are the areas, these are the ways, and how the authors here have presented, of course, the topics as the topics that have been studied and presented to this present August audience is not a small one. It's a very, very vast area, and especially when it really involves a new and fundamentally opposing ontological ways of looking at the universe and its contents in generality and in particulars. This is not a very small issue. It has been in the books for a very long time. Here's the history of the Occidental world as well as the history of the Islamic civilization have both proceeded on this direction, and but it has somehow been given up for one way, for one reason or the other, and that absence and that forgetfulness, an oblivious way of really looking at our thought development, has really caused a fairly large gap in the scientific literature and science, and within which is economics as a budding. Always in this area of ethical question, have become a novice, and that novice, though it is there as a nascent, as a newborn thing, it still needs to be thoroughly investigated. And that is all that I really have to present in to cover up the presentations that have been made. And once again, thanks to every one of the audience to have come and listened to us, and to the IEA, the International Economic Association, to have given us this very honored forum to bring forth our contributed session in a field that we thought should be important and should be really presented to you. And thank you again very much.